All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chuck Piotrowski. It is noon California time and 3 o'clock my time here in New York. And I just want to say greetings from the heart of the state of New York. Here's a kind of a current picture, if you will, of the conditions here in central New York. And it's a wonderful, beautiful late January day. Obviously, I would much rather be in Southern California enjoying the beautiful scenery there. It's one of my favorite places on the planet, actually. Um, let's get started. So, here, thanks to all of our sponsors for today's meeting. Greatly appreciated. Any opportunity we get a chance to share knowledge and meet each other is a great thing. And thank you to all of these vendors for making this happen today. It's just again a wonderful thing because we're smarter together. Put it that way. Um, my name again is Chuck Piotrowski. The presentation today is going to be on Compliance Center, Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, from the perspective of records managers or information governance or folks in IT who've been saddled with this responsibility. To give you a bit of a background, I've been doing this for about 25 years, obviously not all in Microsoft Compliance Center. I started out as a curator in a museum many years ago and moved over to records management, information governance, and all kinds of organizations, including large education, international manufacturing, and highly regulated utilities. Um, and then many years ago, or not too many years ago, but I started my own company to consult and to provide the knowledge for not only setting up Microsoft 365 Compliance Center for Records Management and Information Governance, because that's a relatively new thing, but just helping organizations manage the information overload that their organizations are facing. So that's a little bit about me, but I just wanted to give you that background that I'm not an IT technician. I'm not a coder. I'm not a database builder. I worry more about how users are working with information and whether they're being compliant, effective, and efficient with that information um, than I do with the actual nuts and bolts of the technology. But we'll get into that in a little bit in a moment here. Our agenda today, we have about 45 minutes today. I'm going to talk to you about RIDGE, which is an acronym for a programmatic approach. I'll get into that acronym fairly soon. We're going to look at, or we're going to address some issues around Microsoft, and by issues I don't mean bad things, but we're going to address some subjects around Microsoft 365 Compliance Center as a tool in your toolkit. And then after that, we'll actually go into a live demo or a live instance. I have an E5 instance, so I'll remind you of that when we get into it. It is the top tier you can get for businesses, and so your mileage will vary, so to speak, if you have an E5, E3, Gov. GCC. We're learning that Gov is under documented in terms of its capabilities compared to E5. So we're all kind of learning where the Gov instances aren't the same as E5. We're working with Microsoft to kind of understand those gaps. And then finally, a summary. We're going to go back over kind of the issues that we talked about today. So stretch out your fingers, scratch your eyes, move your hips. We're gonna eat your lunch, whatever you're doing. Sit back, relax, and we'll go on this journey together. So RIDGE is it's really a programmatic approach to compliance, and like I said, it's an acronym for the records, information, data governance, and electronic format. And you don't have to memorize that or anything like that. It's just an acronym I like to use for presentations. It is basically there is someone in your organization or some program or some department, or some group that has the responsibility of ensuring that the organization is compliant, effective, and efficient with their content. Sometimes it's multiple departments. The legal department might have a piece of it. IT might have another piece. If you're a big organization, you might have org development or process improvement teams. And that's one of the challenges around just managing content in an organization is that because it applies to everyone, especially M365, when everyone in an organization is using it, not one person or one group is really responsible for its success. So whenever we talk about adopting Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, we have to start with like really the programmatic approach. Who is responsible for it? Who is responsible for the not just the implementation? We know that's going to be IT, but the adoption, the successful adoption of Microsoft 365. And that is an old question. 15 years ago, I would have asked, who's responsible for the adoption of the Microsoft Office products in your business? And again, the answer 15 years ago, as it would be today, is, well, no one, nobody, no single group, which is really curious because it's probably, outside of the payroll system and purchase orders and money coming in and money going out, it's probably the number one used and most important tool in your organization is your Office 365 or Microsoft Office tool set. Yet there's rarely is there a single owner get dedicated to the success of this. So I bring that up because I just want you to be aware that this is a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about is relatively new from Microsoft 365 point of view, but from an overall use, adoption, improvement, and application to business needs, usually it's up to the individual users to adopt Microsoft 365. But on the compliance side, what we're seeing today is that there's a lot of different groups who either get stuck with it, so to speak, or want to manage it. And so it's very important that you have a dedicated kind of program to it. And that's really the first step we take with organizations is say, if you guys figure it out, we can recommend what group should do it, but come to a consensus on who's going to be not the technical owner, but the business owner of Compliance Center and who's going to be the business owner of M365. Now, IT, what we're seeing in the last 2 years or 3 years, especially from Office 365 to M365, and the wonderful evolution of Compliance Center. To be honest, and I'm speaking as an objective consultant. 5 years ago, those words would not have rolled off my tongue. It was very challenging to get compliance within Office 365 due to the nature of kind of the disparate pieces within Microsoft or Office 365 then. But what we're seeing is a progressive, agile, user-centered, compliance officer-centered platform, which is really strong. But the challenge now is this compliance center has two major components. It has security and it has compliance. Now, you don't have to be an organization development nerd to understand that there's a big difference between security and compliance. Security is, it's the physical security of your offices. It is the technical and digital security of the content in your systems. The hackers and the digital loss prevention thing. If you're in a government organization, it's secret, top secret. Or if you're in a business, it's the same thing. It's going to be sensitive, secret, secret sauce kind of stuff. And so that's security. Compliance has been really, are you following the laws, rules, and regulations that govern the management of information? That's compliance. And that has traditionally been the purview of records management programs, legal teams. Sometimes there'll be an independent compliance team, but that's pretty rare. So basically, if you have a purchase order, sitting in SharePoint, are you keeping that purchase order from 6 years of the date of the document or not? Can you confirm that business? Yes or no? Yes, yes, you are. Okay, you're compliant. You deleted it before those 6 years are up. You are not compliant. And so we've had to work with organizations to illustrate kind of the difference between IT and this compliance piece, what we call Ridge. IT has always been the pipes people, right? They make sure that that water flows. It goes from point of origin, coming all the way to your hands or to your cup. And that's a wonderful thing. You turn on that faucet, it's going to work. That is your IT team, and they do. That's a wonderful thing that they do. What that water tastes like, whether you can use it to make soup, or whether it's got poison in it or whatever, um, that might not necessarily be the purview or historically been the purview of IT, right? Users are allowed to use as long as they don't break the system. It's their business. And so folks like me, the records managers, the information governors, the information managers, we stay up at night because of the flavor of that water. We hope our IT colleagues are staying up at night because that water needs to flow. So we kind of use this simple analogy to kind of show the difference between the two. But the important part here for this meeting is that both of these pieces, the flavor of the water and the quality of the pipes, are both managed in Compliance Center. And because Compliance Center right now is usually housed with IT, the challenge we have is the records management and information governance components, and the e-discovery components are all in the Compliance Center with the security. So the IT security people are they're having a hard time, if you will, sharing out some of the features of Compliance Center. But anyway, and because they're not sharing out, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but the security people, their job is to be secure. They're not going to share things without a very clear, logical reason. So without that clear, logical reason, they're gonna keep it. They're going to keep Compliance Center amongst themselves. The challenge is within that Compliance Center is the capability to manage records and information. And so now IT, or specifically IT security, winds up becoming the owner and accountable group for managing compliance and records management, which is something they've never had to do. So it's a really interesting situation. So why use Compliance Center? It's important for us to understand why we would use Compliance Center, Microsoft Compliance Center. One of the challenges, obviously, is there's laws, rules, regulations, and self-determined best practices across the platform. So we're all in a company. It's called Smith Company. We might have policies around keeping information. We will keep operating procedures for 6 years for knowledge management purposes. Obviously, there's regulations if you're trading on the New York Stock Exchange. There's rules if you have OSHA. There are laws. Clearly the United States and Mexico have laws around managing information and how long to keep stuff. Tax. The IRS in the United States is the obvious, record keep has obvious record laws. MSHA, mining, people like that all have laws around keeping information effective. We encourage. Microsoft Compliance Center Records Management can do this. It's a wonderful thing. We further encourage Microsoft 365 Compliance Center because we believe it's effective. We've over the last 20 years, 15 years, we've seen multiple systems plugged in, modified, crafted to make them be able to manage SharePoint, Outlook, share drives, things like that. What we're seeing now with Compliance Center is you can actually do all of this management in one place. And that's very exciting for us because most of my day 10 years ago was applying these laws, rules, and regulations to multiple systems. To be able to do it to one system and then have that one system tentacle out and manage the content in many different places is a wonderful thing. And then from the user point of view, efficiency. One of the things we do want to do as records managers is we want to make sure our users are compliant. The best way to do that is to not make them think about compliance. Give them an environment they choose to work in. Outlook is a great example. SharePoint is another great example. Don't make them move things from one spot to, quote, the record repository or the record system. It's so hard to ensure that users will do that, let alone do that efficiently and effectively. So if they can keep their information in place, then that's a great thing. They can work in place, no transfers. And of course, we in IT don't have to keep building these migration tools to go back and forth. And then, of course, having to maintain those migration tools as soon as the systems reach obsolescence. Um, One of the other issues I'd like to bring up about Compliance Center, it is, because it is security and compliance. So in security, there's data loss prevention. There's all kinds of tagging for sensitivity, but also it also includes the records labels, information governance labels, things like that. Privacy, a lot of privacy labels, because it has all of these different things in it. It becomes, I call it a Swiss Army knife. There's so many different things you can do with it. It almost becomes uh, a burden or overwhelming to an IT person or to the records manager or to the lawyer or paralegal who's responsible, or to the system administrator who might be the system admin for M365 but has never done any of these things. So having that multidisciplined group or a multidisciplined person, if that's even possible these days, um, to live in this space is a really good thing. It is highly configurable. The stuff I'll show you today is built for demos. Every organization I've seen has rolled out M365 Compliance Center in a different way. It looks and feels the same, mind you, but who does it, what these rules look like, how they're entered, are done in many different ways. And then finally, because it is a mutt or a mixture of many different kind of professions in Compliance Center, where Microsoft is still having a challenge is using persona-based user experiences. I, records manager, come in as records manager, and I see that pretty much the same thing as the information security people when they come in and see, or your system administrator comes in and see. We all see the same dashboard. So the problem is the vocabulary that is used throughout the dashboard can mean different things to different people. Records managers over here, a file is something very different. I shouldn't say very different, but it can mean something different than someone in IT. A policy, this is a great example. A policy to a records manager is, clearly something that the legal department has approved and put up, for everyone to follow. We will have the following holidays. You will work 40 hours a week. You will not harass each other. We will be kind. That's a policy. To an IT person, a policy is something that could be hard coded in to ensure that only the right people have access to the right information. And of course, a record can also mean different things. To a records manager, a record is, it is that document that documents the transaction of business in some way, shape, or form. A record to an IT person might have a different meaning. How many records are in that database or in that spreadsheet? Because there's not persona-based user interfaces for Compliance Center, sometimes these words can get very confusing depending upon who's coming in. But it's like I said, it's a critique of the system, but it's not a knock on the system. They're trying to do, Microsoft 365 is trying to do so many different things here. And so here we'll start getting in. This is just a slide, but like I said, I'll bring up the live instance here in a second. But so here is your Microsoft 365 dashboard, and already you could see kind of the different pieces. And I don't know if this is an attempt to provide different user experiences, or if this is just a legacy of the Swiss Army knife. That is, Microsoft has a huge challenge bringing in multiple disciplines into one, what they call solution catalog or dashboard. And so here they split up information governance and records management into two different worlds. If you're a records manager and you see this, manages your content lifecycle using solutions, and records managers say, well, that's records management. So the the records managers, and this is what we've been telling our friends in records management, is you got to let go of these textbook definitions. This is Microsoft's world. We're working in it. We got to give them a little bit of slack and understand their vocabulary, even though that vocabulary or their perceptions might be different from our professional discipline definitions of everything. So that's really been the first challenge, is trying to kind of open up our, get rid of our guardrails and just kind of say, look at all of the choices within Compliance Center. If you're a records manager, look at the actual functions of this tool and figure out if that function is your function or somebody else's in your organization. So, but anyway, I just wanted to show that because this presentation is for records managers. And I think some records managers get their hands on Compliance Center and they come in and they immediately expect it to be like Documentum or OpenText or some traditional document management, records management tool. And while Microsoft 365 has many of those features, it also has bazillions of other features, and sometimes those bazillions of other features get in the way of that records management kind of view. So, all right. One of the things I do advise records managers on, and this is very new for records managers and information governance people and lawyers, paralegals responsible for this stuff. Rarely, if ever, have we had access to platform updates. And if records managers, information governance people, legal people, if we are going to be given responsibility and accountability within Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, we also need to know when there are updates to those tools. And one of the great things, or I argue is a great thing about Microsoft 365, is it is changing all the time for the better. Sometimes not so much, but most of the times it is. But those changes are actually come through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, not the Compliance Center, but the Admin Center. So traditionally, records managers would never have access to a platform admin center. That would be your IT folks. But where changes are coming to the platform or to the records management tool, they're announced here. This is one from earlier this year, obviously. So records managers have been somewhat befuddled with Office 365, Microsoft 365, because things will appear to change from day to day or month to month, because they don't have access to these notices. So we've had to help a lot of IT teams make sure that when there's an update to records management, that the people who are operating the records management information governance components of Compliance Center know that there's been a change. But again, that's awkward for IT and for records management, because rarely has there been that kind of elbow to elbow, hip to hip kind of relationship between these two groups. I got to say, I was very lucky for a number of years to be an IT manager responsible for records management inside of IT. That made me very aware of a lot of these kind of changes. But unfortunately, a lot of records managers are not included in IT. And matter of fact, it's by their choice a lot of times. A lot of records managers might not be the most technically proficient people and might actually be a little bit shy or fearful of technology for various reasons, and would never ask for this kind of visibility. So it's an opportunity, if you're in IT and you're listening to this, reach out to your people in records management, see if they want to have this kind of information available to them, because that will propel your user adoption significantly. All right, so we're going to go on to the live tour. I've got about a little bit before half past the hour. Gonna right. All right. So, for those who've not seen this before, this might be new, or this will be new. For those who have seen it, hopefully, my or the perspective we bring, records management brings, will be kind of a different way of looking at the same thing. So this is Compliance Center. It's card based or widget based or whatever you want to call it. It has a nice, in my opinion, almost Windows 8-ish kind of tile user interface. And that's really cool. But already, if you're a records manager, information governance person, it's overwhelming. This dashboard has a lot of amazing features in it. Um, your total compliance score, and Microsoft has a lot of stuff on managing your compliance in one big kind of ball. Um, and so you can really leverage this for a compliance program. But again, like any score, it has to be modified, and you can work on that. But anyway, it's the point here is that a lot of executives will demand metrics around compliance. And while compliance is often a art rather than math, um, this is an attempt to kind of to quantify compliance without having to do any spreadsheet adding, subtracting, anything like that. Just it automatically might be a word behind the scenes. Machine learning, a little bit of AI, depending how you want to define that, making up this stuff. So it's really cool. But already you see within the score, protecting information, governing information, access control, managing devices. A records manager would have nothing around, we don't manage devices, protect against threats. So already you see kind of that mix of many different disciplines just within this compliance score. Governing information is the one thing that would be of huge, is that term that records managers would glom onto. But anyway, and uh, retention label use. This is something records managers would definitely want to know about. So you see, Microsoft is beginning to um, dashboard a lot of this compliance stuff, and we'll get into the details of all of this. But anyway, the good news is that this is all very clean. Once I learn about Compliance Center, I can then understand what these tiles are telling me. And like any dashboard, it's meant to be, kind of show danger, like, here, compliant, non-compliant. Um, but anyway, so that's kind of the first piece. This is the home of Compliance Center. So as a records manager, if your IT department gives you, hey, okay, here's Compliance Center, you're going to wind up here and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I am not the person responsible for managing devices or protecting against threats. Why am I here? And it's like, well, you're here because this is where you got to start. Um, I'm not going to do, this is not a tour of Compliance Manager as a whole, but I just wanted to kind of show you the intent of Microsoft and kind of that dashboard Tableau friendliness that they're pushing for, which I think is great. Um, but see, again, this is a lot of this is way outside of the realm of records management. So um, the two pieces that are really of value for records managers are these two: information governance and records management. And I'm just going to pop onto this catalog. They're called solutions. Again, in Microsoft parlance, they're beginning, they want to call these solutions. So that's what they are. Here they are broken out again. Um, you'll see that these other solutions that we have. You'll see there's e-discovery here, which is something many records managers are very involved in. Um, and if records managers are getting involved in privacy, then obviously um, the data subject issues are going to be in their wheelhouse. But like I said, there's a little bit of everything for many different kinds of people. But for a records manager, it's going to be records management and information governance are the two places. And this is where, as a records manager, I'm going to say, okay, well, this one sounds like me, so I'm going to go to records management. This is again where we get a little challenged, because information governance and records management are two sides of the same coin. And uh, I'll show you that in a second. You'll see that there'll be the same labels. Maybe I can just do this now. Uh, you'll see that there's uh, the same labels. That's what- Sorry, team. We'll get this up for you. Sorry. There we go. And you'll see that they'll have file label policies here, label policies here. Retention, which is a key component of records management to keep stuff for a specific amount of time, is in information governance. File plan, which is in this case, it's the record schedule. I know those two things don't equal in a records manager's head. So a file plan can mean taxonomy to a records manager, but here file plan means really retention schedule is here. So and then of course Microsoft is using labels in many, I shouldn't say many, in a few different ways. Label policies, and then policies. So it gets a little confusing, and to be honest, I might not be the smartest person on the planet, but like I said, I've been doing records management for a long time, and I just had to sit down for a long time and go through each one of these features and kind of do my own notes and say, well, by label policy, they mean this. By retention, they mean this. By file plan, it means this. But so that's kind of the first warning for records managers, is that there's these two solutions, which you should have access to both of if you're a records manager, because they're kind of interdependent. And but they do different things. So I'm going to go back to records. We're at 1:30, and so I'm going to go back to this records management solution. Now this is the overview. Now you'll see already that it's kind of simple, and a little bit UI, needs a little bit of UI work here. So it seems like they kind of got to a point and they stopped here at Microsoft. But like any records manager, our job is to make sure people keep stuff for the appropriate amount of time and don't get rid of it beforehand. And what's nice about the records management overview page is that we can see all pending dispositions. I can manage my retention schedule or file plan. I just click on that. Microsoft did do a great job with dispositions. If you are familiar with OpenText or Documentum, some of this stuff will, this is the bread and butter of those tools, but I can kind of come in and see what's up for deletion. So yeah, I've been getting that error message, but there we go. But anyway, this is where a records manager or someone with the right responsibility and accountability can come in and actually delete things. The retention period here in this case was applied on this date. The document expired on this date, and now it can be deleted. For those of you who are not in records management listening to this, there are dozens of different ways to do dispositions, disposition approvals. Usually your audit team, your legal team, sometimes your finance team, your compliance team, or your business owners all have to review documents before they're deleted. What I wanted to show you today is that Microsoft 365 has that disposition process, which is a basic functionality of any records management system. It can list the items that have been disposed. So that's kind of cool too. You can keep track of what you deleted. You have to work with your IT department to kind of set up what expectation will be in your audit trails, things like that. But anyway, if you're a records manager, you're glad that this is there. And the second piece I wanted to show you is the file plan. This is your retention schedule. These are all, this is a test instance, so it's not going to be a full-on organizational retention schedule. but I did want to show you just kind of an example here. I know that's probably small and tiny for you to read, but this data that you see over here on the right hand side, this is going to be what what you're used to seeing in your retention schedule. You'll see the description, if you have a reference ID, and most retention schedules do. If you categorize your documents or your retention schedule, that's the opportunity to do it here. Under what authority? Is it laws, rules, or regulations? If there's a citation, this is actually a real citation in United States law. So you can do retention schedules in Compliance Center, which is fantastic. There's your retention period. You can modify the event based on when it was last modified. Have an action. There's multiple choices here. Obviously, for this one, I wanted a review. You don't have to have a review. You could have it if if it has not been declared a record, then delete after 2 years from last modification. Boom, without going through a review. So there's a lot of powerful features here, and this is where that choice. This is where application of this, making those right choices, is going to be very important. It tells you who created the rule, when it was done. So it's got those nice features in it if you're managing retention schedules. So many organizations have a third-party tool to manage retention schedules, but you can actually dump it onto a spreadsheet and upload it here. There's actually an import feature. It's a little wonky. I'm sure that will get better over time. The import feature, but it works. It works. You have to, like any data import, any data science effort, 4 out of 5 days is just spent cleaning data. The 5th day you actually get to import it, and that's going to be true here, I bet. Publishing labels. This is where it gets a little awkward, because here I would expect to see retention labels. But I'll get it to that in a second. Let me kind of get out of here for a sec. Go back to here. All right. Label policies. This is you set these up in information governance, and this might be changing over time. I'm not, it seems to have changed. But a label policy is where I can publish, or where I can apply the retention labels. So what is really neat is I can I can apply specific retention labels to here it is, to only Exchange Outlook emails, only SharePoint sites, or specific sites, OneDrive accounts, which is huge for Microsoft 365, and groups. And this is really powerful. Potentially, you could actually manage records based upon the role of an individual. So if Juan Gonzalez works in procurement, you could actually, and he's in the procurement Microsoft 365 group, the content he creates could be, you could assign retention to his content by default, because he works in procurement, and 99% of the stuff he works on is going to be buying and purchasing for procurement, and then that's going to have a retention schedule, of 6 years. So this is all, this is super cool. But again, this is all going to evolve around your policies and your procedures in the organization of where you want to apply your retention. And this is where working with hand in hand with IT and legal is very important. I could have all these on, I could have all these off. And generally, in my experience with Microsoft 365, only right now, people are just asking for SharePoint, because really what they're asking for is retention on Teams. Teams automatically creates SharePoint sites, etc. So anyway, so that's really cool. Or I could just say do it let's do it everywhere, or specific locations. So that's again it's a very nice feature of the records management piece here. Now, events. This is where you get to determine, whether the event is going to be. You can create events like end of the fiscal year 2019-20. You can use there's already onboarded, or excuse me, built in events like data loss modification, date of creation, things like that. But if you have unique ones in your organization, you can build those out too. Um, so that's nice. And then of course we looked at this. We kind of started out with disposition, but here it is again. And these are all of the retention codes, and then the pending dispositions on those retention codes for action. And I can export this to a spreadsheet, send it around my company, which is usually how business units approve deletions, is by going through very big spreadsheets and saying yes, no, yes, no. Now, the information governance piece, you'll see again some of the same things. Here's your records retention labels, creating a label. Here's your label policies. The only one I have here is the SharePoint only. Import. I can import yeah, this is interesting. This is new. Last time I went through this, it didn't have this, so I'll have to look at this. But this might actually be. I'm gonna have to pass on this one, team, because I'm not exactly. I'm not familiar with this one, so I'll have to check that one out. Retention, and again, see the retention. I would expect to see my retention schedule, but what I'm getting are these labels again. An archive, this is one of those words that means different things to different people. In an IT world, it's all my email, right? Archive all my email. It's the old PST file, or we call it a PTS file because it gave us post-traumatic stress in the legal department. But archive, in this instance is really the IT archiving of email boxes. In records management, archive has a completely different meaning. It is I have documents that I need to retain forever. Data sets from drug trials I need to archive. And there's a whole world out there of archiving systems. Micro Focus is one of those, where they will take data sets or personnel files or environmental filings, or that you have to keep forever, and they will archive it in a digital archive that will keep it forever. Museums use a kind of a different kind of tool for archiving. Preservica is a really good one that people should look at. That's for keeping things like a digital version of the Declaration of Independence or whatever, for a long time. So again, here, in the information governance world, they're sneaking in kind of some of these IT functions. So, and it's really archiving mailboxes. And to be honest with you, if you go get a certificate in information governance there's an information governance professional group out there that's aligned with the records managers group. This is not like on their quiz or on their certification test. There's nothing about mailbox archiving and information governance. So again, Microsoft is kind of using this terminology relatively loosely to kind of group things, and affinity might be more like it. Information governance would definitely be concerned about the use of Outlook, in the organization. But your information governance team would not be the team that archives email boxes when the executive's mailbox, fills up to a terabyte or whatever they have nowadays. So anyway, so that's that's the tour I wanted to give you. Like I said, I hope you don't come away thinking this was an unfair critique of the tool. I hope the criticisms that I bring were constructive. And like I said, we do generally recommend this tool to clients for most business cases because it is such a good resource, and and most importantly, it's getting better all the time, and that's really important. Um, so, if you have questions, let me bring up my contact information again. Um, there we go. If you have questions for me, do not hesitate. I believe, or I'm sorry for asking the ether this, but I believe we have time for Q&A if people are allowed to do it. But I can't, I can't answer that question right now. So if anybody has a question, they could probably try taking their microphone off and asking them.
Currently, attendees can't come off mute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, you're good.
So thank you.
So if you want, we can. If you want to hang out and just answer questions in chat,
Yes,
we can go ahead and do that. We have 15 minutes until Nikki starts, so you can probably take about another 5 minutes if anybody has any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that and apologize for not knowing that.
Oh, no worries. It's all good.
All right, so if you do have a question, put it in the chat. I'll answer it. Otherwise, I'll just riff. No, in a typical organization, how many label? Oh, excellent question, Larry. Thank you for asking. In a typical organization, well, first of all, that's a tough one because there's no, all organizations are different. But if you're talking about a multinational organization, there could be hundreds, 600, 700. There could be thousands of rules. Those rules would be collated or brought together to about 100 different choices. Sometimes those 100 choices can be knocked down to 40, 45. So the user only has to choose from 45 rather than 1,000. So the label policies the number of label policies will directly reflect how the records program chooses to tag information. They could give users, here's every single law, here's every single law that exists in the United States and Mexico on tagging information. So user might have to go through that, might have to go through thousands, like going through it's like walking through the library, right? And picking out a book. But that's obviously user unfriendly. So what we've seen is most organizations have around 1,000 rules. And like I said, they bake it down into big bucket. But the opportunity, a big bucket of like 40 or 50 choices. Hey, it's finance. We're going to keep it for 7 years. Hey, it's HR. We're going to keep it for, employee tenure plus 75 years. Hey, it's environmental stuff. We're going to keep it forever. Hey, it's business strategy. We're going to keep it for 5 years for knowledge management purposes. So people like me spend weeks and weeks and weeks and months kind of taking those thousands of laws, rules, and regulations and getting it down to a bite-sized choice for users. It's kind of like cataloging images, right? A picture paints 1,000 words. Where do you stop with some of these things? But the cool thing is with Microsoft 365, we can upload a spreadsheet of those 1,000 rules. If you have an E5 license and you have SharePoint and you have Power Apps, Power Development, and go into and start looking at SharePoint syntax, you can actually do intelligent classification, and you can start saying, if this document has the word finance, the word purchase order, the word, John Smith, and John Smith works in the finance department, then classify as 7 years and apply this label. That is, hopefully we'll be talking in 2 years, and that will be the kind of stuff that will be automatic, that as long as we get the rule list in on the back end uploaded, users won't have to choose, their retention. And that's whether users choose their retention or the system does it for them is a organizational choice. And a typical organization, unfortunately, will make their users do the choice, because this is a legal issue. It's all about liability. Making the users make the choice puts the accountability and responsibility on the user. And that has its pluses and minuses. If you automatically apply something and you get that application wrong, If you say, oh, if it says finance, if it says purchase, and it says, Jose Gonzalez, therefore it equals finance, 6 years, and you wind up deleting that for some reason 5 years before because the machine learning didn't learn enough, you could be held accountable for what they call spoliation, which is basically the court will think that you're not being competent around managing information. So anyway, yeah, it's really cool. And you'll find if you're implementing Compliance Center, most of your discussions will not be about the functionality of Compliance Center. It will be about how, who's responsible for doing what is that retention schedule, how are we going to implement it, what do you mean we only, we have 10,000 rules. It'll be all of these kind of process questions that will have to get hammered out before you even start using Compliance Center, because and that's where we found we've had to help out organizations because they get Compliance Center, they call us up and they say, can you implement this? And we say, yes, of course you can. We get in, we start asking those questions. Well, who's responsible for the rules? Well, we don't have the rules. Well, if you don't have the rules, what are you compliant with? Well, we don't know yet. Well, let's, so Compliance Center begs an organization to ask a lot of questions it might not have asked before. All right, well, I'm gonna let you guys go. We have 10 minutes before the next meeting, so we'll clear out. But you do have my contact information. I hope this has been helpful to everyone. I appreciate your time and attention. And like I said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Right now, there is not a organic user group around records management and information governance around Compliance Center. You think there would, but some organizations like ARMA and AIM, AIIM, they're starting, and of course NAGARA, which is the National Government Records Managers Groups, they're starting to put together kind of user groups around implementing Microsoft 365 compliance. And so we're at that stage of adoption where these user groups are beginning to form. So keep your eyes open and participate in those user groups when you see them. I am going to sign off. So again, I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Take care of yourself, stay safe, be kind to each other, and hopefully someday I'll get a chance to meet you all in person. Take care.